over. You can sit here. Don't bite me. Move over. Hey! Move over. Sit on me if you don't. Come on. Oh, quit. You're being grumpy. All right. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good to have you back. It may seem odd, but I'm playing a little bit of American in Paris. I'm doing it intentionally. I hope you can hear it. Let's enjoy the music for a moment and I will begin. Hope you're having a good Sunday evening. Lovely to have you here by the fire. It's not exactly cold out now, but it's been dreary all day and it's been wonderful to be by the fire this evening. Well, now that you've heard a little bit of American Paris, I will stop the music for a moment and tell you that the American Paris reminded me of some things I want to share with you at the end of this broadcast. It's about our present estate in this country and the world and what we might consider doing to help others and to provide hope. And I'm going to have some reflections through visual art and equipment to make visual art and music. And I'll share my thoughts with you about the music. That's why I put on American in Paris. We're going to start this evening with chapter 15. This is our last chapter. I'll announce at the end what we're going to do next after I talk to you. Rabidash the Ridiculous. Next turn of the road brought them out from among the trees, and there, across green lawns, sheltered from the north wind by the high wooded ridge at its back, they saw the castle of Anverd. It was very old, built of a warm, reddish stone. Before they reached the gate, King Kunluna came out to meet them, not looking at all like Erebus' idea of a king, and wearing the oldest of old clothes, for he had just come from making a round of the kennels with his huntsman, and stopped for a moment to wash his doggy hands. But the bow with which he greeted Erebus as he took her hand would have been stately enough for an emperor. "Little lady," he said, "we bid you very heartily welcome. If my dear wife were all still alive, we could make you better cheer, but could not do it, but with a better will. And I am sorry that you have had misfortunes and been driven from your father's house, which cannot but be a grief to you. My son Cor has told me all about your adventures together and all your valor." "It was he who did all that, sir," said Erebus. "Why, he rushed at a lion to save me." "Eh? What's that?" said King Lona, his face brightening. "I haven't heard that part of the story." Then Erebus told it, and Cor, who had very much wanted the story to be known, though he felt he couldn't tell it himself, didn't enjoy it so much as he had expected, and indeed felt rather foolish. But his father enjoyed it very much indeed, and in the course of the next few weeks, told it to so many people that Kor wished it had never happened. Poor Kor. That's what happens when people tell stories to your parents, especially your dad. You want his approval, but then you get embarrassed when other people keep telling it. So you think it's never enough, of course. Then the king turned to Hwin and Bree, the talking horses, and was just as polite to them as to Erebus, and asked them a lot of questions about their families, where they had lived in Narnia before they had been captured. The horses, on the other hand, were rather tongue-tied, for they weren't yet used to being talked to as equals by humans. Grown-up humans, that is. They didn't mind Erebus and Kor. Presently, Queen Lucy came out from the castle and joined them, and King Lune said to Erebus, "My dear, here is a loving friend of our house, and she has been seeing that your apartments are put to rights for you better than I could have done it." "You'd like to come and see them, wouldn't you?" said Lucy, kissing Erebus. They liked each other at once and soon went away together to talk about Erebus's bedroom and Erebus' boudoir and about getting clothes for her and all sorts of things girls do talk about on such occasions. After lunch, which they had on the terrace, sounds like fun. They must have had coronavirus also. They couldn't be in the house. It was cold. It was a cold meal. Birds and cold game pie and wine, bread and cheese. King Lune ruffled up his brow and heaved a sigh and said, "Hey ho! We still have that sorry creature Rabidash on our hands, my friends, and must needs resolve what to do with him." Lucy was sitting on the king's right and Erebus on his left. King Edmund sat at the end of the table and the Lord Darin faced him at the other. Dar and Peridon and Kor and Corin were on the same side as the king. "Your Majesty would have a perfect right to strike off his head," said Peridon. "Such an assault as he made puts him on the level with assassins." "It's very true," said Edmund, "that even a traitor may mend. I've known one that did," and he looked very thoughtful. "To kill this Rabidash would go near to raising war with the Tisrocs," said Darin. "A fig for the Tisrocs," said King Lune. "His strength is in numbers, and numbers will never cross the desert. But I have no stomach for killing men, even traitors, in cold blood. To have cut his throat in the battle would have eased my heart mightily, but this is a different thing." "By my counsel," said Lucy, "your Majesty shall give him another trial. Let him go free on straight promise of fair dealing in the future. It may be that he will keep his word." "Maybe apes will grow honest, sister," said Edmund, "but by the lion, if he breaks it again, may it be in such time and place that any of us could swap off his head in clean battle." "It shall be tried," said the king. And then to one of the attendants, "Send for the prisoners, friend." Rabidash was brought before them in chains. To look at him, anyone would have supposed he had passed the night in a noisome dungeon without food or water, but in reality he had been shut up in quite a comfortable room and provided with an excellent supper. But as he was sulking far too furiously to touch the supper and had spent the whole night stamping and roaring and cursing, he naturally did not look his best. That's what happens when we do things like that. "Your Royal Highness needs not to be told," said King Lune, "that by the law of nations as well as by all reasons of prudent policy we have a good right to your head, as ever one mortal man had against another. Nevertheless, in consideration of your youth and the ill nature, devoid of all gentilese and courtesy, which you have doubtless had in the land of slaves and tyrants, we are disposed to set you free, unharmed, on these conditions. First, that Curse you for a barbarian dog, spluttered Rabadash. Do you think I will even hear your conditions? Fa! You talk very largely of nurture, and I know not what. It's easy to a man in chains. Ha! Take off these vile bonds. Give me a sword, and let any of you who dares then debate with me. Nearly all the lords sprang to their feet, and Corin shouted, Father, can I box him, please? Peace, your majesties, my lords, said King Lune. Have we no more gravity among us than to be so chafed by the taunt of a patchok? Sit down, Corin, or shalt leave the table. I ask your highness again to hear our conditions. I hear no conditions from barbarians and sorcerers, said Rabadash. Not one of you dare touch a hair of my head. Every insult you have heaped upon me shall be paid with oceans of Narnian and Arcalandish blood. Terrible shall be the vengeance of the Tisroc. Even now, but kill me, and the burnings and the torturings in these northern lands shall become a tale to frighten the world 1,000 years hence. Beware, beware, beware. The bolt of Tash falls from above. Does it ever get caught on a hook halfway? Asked Corin. Shame, Corin, said the king. Never taunt a man save when he is stronger than you. Then, as you please. Oh, you foolish Rabadash, sighed Lucy. Next moment, Cor wondered why everyone at the table had risen and was standing perfectly still. Of course, he did the same himself, and then he saw the reason. Aslan was among them, though no one had seen him coming. Rabadash started at the immense shape of the lion and paced softly in between him and the accusers, his accusers. Rabadash, said Aslan, take heed. Your doom is very near, but you may still avoid it. Forget your pride. What have you to be proud of? And your anger. Who has done you wrong? And accept the mercy of these good kings. Then Rabadash rolled his eyes and spread out his mouth into a horrible, long, mirthless grin like a shark, and wagged his ears up and down. Anyone can learn how to do that if they take the trouble. Have you tried it? Sometimes I can do it, I can't now. He had always found this very effective in Calorman. The bravest had trembled when he made these faces, and ordinary people had fallen to the floor, and sensitive people have often fainted. But what Rabadash hadn't realized is that it is very easy to frighten people who know you can have them boiled alive at the moment you give the word. The grimaces didn't look at all alarming in Archenland. Indeed, Lucy only thought Rabadash was going to be sick. Maybe sick to his stomach. Excuse me. Demon! 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 Shrieked the prince. I know you. You are the foul friend of Narnia. Oh, the foul fiend of Narnia. You are the enemy of the gods. Learn who I am, horrible phantasm. I am descended from Tash, the inexplorable, the irresistible. The curse of Tash is upon you. Lightning in the shape of scorpions will be rained upon you. The mountains of Narnia shall be ground into dust. Have a care, Rabadash, said Aslan quietly. The doom is nearer now. It is at the door, and it has lifted the latch. Let the sky fall, shrieked Rabadash. Let the earth gape. Let blood and fire obliterate the world. But be sure I will never desist until I have dragged to my palace by her hair the barbarian queen, the daughter of dogs, The hour has struck, said Aslan, and Rabadash saw to his supreme horror that everyone had begun to laugh. They couldn't help it. Rabadash has been wagging his ears all the time, and as soon as Aslan said, the hour has struck, the ears began to change. They grew longer and more pointed and soon were covered with gray hair. And while everyone was wondering where they had seen ears like that before, Rabadash's face began to change too. It grew longer and thicker at the top and large-eyed, and the nose sank back into the face, or else the face swelled out and became all nose. And there was hair all over it. Ooh, yuck. And his arms grew longer and came down in front of him until his hands were resting on the ground. Only they weren't hands now, they were hoofs. And he was standing on all fours, and his clothes disappeared, and everyone laughed louder and louder, because they couldn't help it. For now, what had been Rabadash was simply and unmistakably a donkey. We saw some really cute donkeys today. They were pets of a family with a young child, where Abigail and Nathan were saying. Sorry. The terrible thing was his human speech lasted just a moment longer than his human shape, so that when he realized the change that was coming over him, he screamed out, "Oh, not a donkey! Mercy! If it were even a horse, in hor ah." And so the words died away into a donkey's bray. Now hear me, Rabadash, said Aslan. Justice shall be mixed with mercy. You shall not always be an ass. And at this, of course, the donkey twitched its ears forward. And that also was so funny that everybody laughed all the more. They tried not to, but they tried in vain. You have appealed to Tash, said Aslan, and in the temple of Tash you shall be healed. You must stand before the altar of Tash in Tashbaan at the great autumnal feast this year, and there in the sight of all Tashbaan your ass's shape will fall from you, and all men will know you as Prince Rabadash. But as long as you live, if ever you go more than 10 miles away from that great temple in Tashbaan, you shall instantly become again as you now are. And from that second change, there will be no return. Whoa. There was a short silence, and then they all stirred and looked at one another as if they were waking from sleep. Aslan was gone. But there was a brightness in the air and on the grass, and a joy in their hearts which assured them that he had been no dream. And anyway, there was a donkey in front of them. King Lune was the kindest-hearted of men, and on seeing his enemy in this regrettable condition, he forgot all his anger. Your Royal Highness, he said, I am most truly sorry that things have come to this extremity. Your Highness will bear witness that it was none of our doing, and of course we shall be delighted to provide Your Highness with shipping back to Tashbaan for the treatment which Aslan has prescribed. You shall have every comfort which Your Highness's situation allows, the best of cattle boats, the freshest of carrots and thistles. But a deafening bray from the donkey and a well-aimed kick at one of the guards made it clear that these kind offers were ungratefully received. And here, to get him out of the way, I'd better finish off the story of Rabadash. Here it was duly sent back by boat to Tashbaan and brought into the temple of Tash at the great autumn festival. And then he became a man again. But of course 4,000 or 5,000 people had seen the transformation, and the affair could not possibly be hushed up. And after old Tisroch's death, when Rabadash became Tisroch in his place, he turned out to be the most peaceable Tisroch Kalaman had ever known. This was because not daring to go more than 10 miles from Tashbaan, he could never go on a war himself, and he didn't want Tarkans to win fame in the wars at his expense. But that is the way Tisrochs got overthrown. But though his reasons were selfish, it made things much more comfortable for all the smaller countries around Kalaman. His own people never forgot that he'd been a donkey. During his reign, and to his face, he was called Rabadash the Peacemaker, but after his death, behind his back, he was called Rabadash the Ridiculous. And if you look him up in a good history of Kalaman, try the local library, you will find him under that name. And to this day in Kalaman schools, if you do anything unusually stupid, I wonder what happens. You're likely to be called a second Rabadash. Meanwhile, at Angerd, everyone was very glad that he had been disposed of before the real fun began, which was a grand feast held that evening on the lawn before the castle, with dozens of lanterns to help the moonlight. And the wine flowed, and the tales were told, and the jokes were cracked. And the silence was made, and the king's poet with two fiddlers stepped out in the middle of the circle. Erebus and Kor prepared themselves to be bored, for the only poetry they knew were the Kalaman type. And you know now what that's like. But at this very first scrape of the fiddles, a rocket seemed to go up inside their heads, and the poet sang the great old lay of Fair Olden, and how he fought the giant Pyre and turned him into stone. And that is the origin of Mount Pyre. It was a two-headed giant, and won the Lady Lynn for his bride. And when it was over, they wished it was going to begin again. And though Bree couldn't sing, he told the story of the fight at Salandra. And Lucy told again. They had all, except Erebus and Kor, heard it many times, but they all wanted it again. The tale of the wardrobe, and how she and King Edmund and Queen Susan and Peter the High King had first come into Narnia. And presently, as it was certain to happen sooner or later, King Loon said at this time for young people to be in bed. And tomorrow, Kor, he added, shall come over all the castle with me and see the estate and mark all its strength and weakness, for it will be thine to guard when I'm gone. But Corin will be the king then, father, said Kor. Nay, lad, said King Loon. Thou art my heir, the crown comes to thee. But I don't want it, said Kor. I'd far rather. 'Tis no question what thou wantest, Kor, nor I either. 'Tis in the course of law. But if we're twins, we must be the same age. Nay, said the king with a laugh. One must come first. Art Corin's elder by full 20 minutes, and his better too. Let's hope, though that's no great sorry, I gotta do this again. One must come first. Art Corin's elder by full 20 minutes, and his better too. Let's hope, though that's no great mystery. And he looked at Corin with a twinkle in his eyes. But father, couldn't you make whichever you like to be the next king? No, the king's under the law, for it's the law makes him a king. Hast no power to start away from thy crown than any sentry from his post. Oh dear, said Kor, I don't want it at all. And Corin, I am most so dreadfully sorry. I never dreamed my turning up was going to chisel you out of your kingdom. Hurrah, hurrah, said Corin. I shan't have to be king. I shan't have to be king. I'll always be a prince. It's princes that have all the fun. And that's truer than thy brother knows, Kor, said King Loon. For this is what it means to be a king, to be first in every desperate attack and last in every desperate retreat, And when there's hunger in the land, as must be now, and then in bad years, to wear finer clothes, laugh louder over scantier meal than any man in your land. When the two boys were going upstairs to bed, Korah asked again Koran if nothing could be done about it. And Koran said, if you say another word about it, I'll knock you down. It would be nice to end the story by saying that after the two brothers never disagreed about afterwards the two brothers never disagreed about anything again, but I'm afraid it would not be true. In reality, they quarreled and fought just about as often as any other two boys would, and all their fights ended, they didn't begin, with Korah getting knocked down. For though when they had both grown up and become swordsmen, Korah was a more dangerous man in battle, neither he nor anyone else in the northern counties could ever equal Koran as a boxer. That's how he got his name of Koran Thunderfist, and how he performed his great exploit against the lapsed bear of Stormness, which was really a talking bear that had gone back to wild bear habits. Koran climbed up to its lair, the Narnian side of Stormness, one winter day when the snow was on the hills, and boxed it without a timekeeper for 33 rounds. And at the end, it couldn't see out of its eyes and became a reformed character. Erebus also had many quarrels, and I'm afraid even fights with Korah, but they always made it up again, so that years later when they were grown up, they were so used to quarreling and making up again that they got married, as to go on doing it more conveniently. And after King Lun's death, they made a good king and queen of Archenland. And Ram the Great, the most famous of all kings of Archenland, was their son. Bree and Hwin lived happily to a great age in Narnia, and both got married, but not to one another. And there weren't many months in which one or both of them didn't come trotting over to the pass to beat their friends at Anvard. There's tomorrow night, let's see here. I'm going to read chapter 1 from Prince Caspian, just as a teaser, and then we will begin to read the Silver Chair. Here it is, I believe. If I can find a copy of Prince Caspian, I will read it. If not, we will start this, and if I find the Prince Caspian, we'll start that. So I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night, but now I have some show and tell, some art and music. I told you I wanted to talk to you about something very important. I don't know about you, but all of us have, I think, have had a really hard time with this sheltering in place. The sheltering has become a quarantine, and the quarantine is very much like the tower in The Little Lame Prince and being imprisoned. And I've shown this to you several times, and I'll show it to you once again. I'm going to start with this, and I'm going to end with some examples from music. I showed you this a few times before. This is the portrait of my daughter Rachel when she was 16. It was painted on the back of an easel, which was cut out to fit in the frame. And I think this represents the way our life appeared to be to us before the coronavirus. We had a perfect little picture that we painted, both for our institutions, for our families, for our homes, for our futures, our careers, and our retirement. The coronavirus has changed all that. This will never be the same again. It may, even if we found a cure tomorrow, it would take a very long time to recover what's been lost and to go back to anything that would look like what we had before. As I said to several friends, there's no such thing as normal ever again, and there's no such thing as new normal. And if you think that your life is normal and full of busyness, as I said to a friend, you volunteered for that. You volunteer for being busy and distracted and too busy and not time for your family, and because you're trying to create this perfect picture for everyone else to see that you're the perfect family, you're the perfect church, you're the perfect government institution, you're the perfect whatever. But actually, because of what's happened, God never, a lot of people ask, well, where is God? And does he play favorites? God never plays favorites, but at the same time, he chooses us. And evil is present in the world, and he did not create it, but he can redeem it. And I'm not one that goes along, like in the story tonight, it talked a lot about curses and judgments against a people. And there are a lot of Christians today that see this coronavirus as a judgment against our national sin. And you can take either side of it. You could take, it's all backed by, you have to be a sinner like me. You have to believe what I do, and if you don't, you're not in. And so that all has to be put down and put away, because what God is asking us to do, it's not a judgment, it's a challenge, and a wonderful challenge. It's what He asked of us when he created us in his image and through Adam. And that is that whatever we have, whatever we do, whatever we take, whatever we give, he wants us to treat it creatively and to make our own picture for the time that we're in. So the institutions that have always been there, a lot of them are not going to be there. So we can no longer look at some other institution as a model for our life. We need to, each of us, be faithful to follow what God has called us to do where we are, even in the midst of suffering and disease. So that's that object lesson. I have one that I promised the children earlier that I would show. I know this is hard for you to see. I can maybe get up and make it closer. This is the most wonderful box, and I got it in Paris 2 years ago. That's why I started the program with music from the American in Paris. It's a little old French box, probably made in in the 1870s, in the 19th century. It says plumière, the French for brush. And it's an artist box, and this particular one has ink points and a pen, and then lo and behold, a secret compartment where there are charcoals and pencils and other accoutrements for sketching. This is a little bit like a portable artist box with brushes and paints, but for sketches and for writing. I just wanted to show you that. I just think it's an object of beauty, but of great utility. So that I promised that earlier, and I couldn't get it open because of the humidity. And now I would like to talk to you through the lens of music. So several friends of mine and I have been talking and FaceTiming during this crisis. And one friend talked to me the other day about how much he has not missed the institutional church or preaching. And he said, what are we doing? Why are we hiring people to do all of this? And I don't agree with that, but at the same time, he does have a point. It's as if our institutions are trying to create something that looks like fellowship, but it's never happened, and it hasn't happened for a long time, and yet it does happen, but it doesn't happen in the way that we wish it would be. It's definitely not a perfect picture. And I think there's a real crisis in the whole idea of fellowship, intimacy, and being present to one another, and I think this crisis has really underlined that whole bankruptcy within our society. I personally am tired of political discussions and the news. The disease itself is bad enough, but the blame and the cursing and the accusations and the falderall for everybody around the world, including our president, our leadership, everyone fails. We're all broken, and this is a crisis that came upon us very fast, and there are a lot of people responsible, but there are a lot of people that were just caught, basically, like you say, with their pants down. They didn't really comprehend or really couldn't comprehend that it would become that serious. I was thinking of it this morning. I read a really interesting article. It was on the AP, I believe, and it was about a place in Italy, a town in Italy, and where the outbreak was really severe, especially in nursing homes. And it compared the preparation of Germany compared to Italy. And the thing that came out that was really interesting is because Italy's economy is so broken, they can't afford to maintain the healthcare that they once had. Whereas Germany, whose economy is strong, was able to keep all the hospitals open and accommodate people in need. And the rate there is very low. And I think there's a lesson here which ties into the music I'm going to talk about. The lesson here is that Germany was humiliated in the Second World War and the First World War. The First World War first. The economy collapsed, very much like our whole world is. Economies are collapsing. It's a very dangerous time. And then in World War II, then Hitler took siege, basically, of a country who was already humiliated, and he brought pride back, and along with it, hatred, like Rabidash and everything else. And I think when Lewis is talking about Rabidash, that land, Tisroc is a little bit, he wrote it after toward the end of the Second World War, but he's kind of, in an underhanded way, talking about things like the Nazis. So this morning, since this is the second part, I have a friend and his family who introduced me to many wonderful forms of music, and in fact introduced me to the Berlin Philharmonic. And he found out, he called me up and said, you ought to try this out. They have it, and I recommend all of this to you, all of you to this. You can get a free trial, I think it's for maybe a month or at least 2 weeks, of the Berlin Philharmonic online, and just go to Berlin Philharmonie, Berliner Philharmonie, and .com, and I believe you can still sign up for at least 2 weeks free to a month free. And the selection of music, the precision of the music is just amazing. And here lies a story through music. After having watched and listened to the Philharmonic in Berlin, I thought to myself, it's really an amazing thing. There's one where they do Beethoven's Ode to Joy in front of the Brandenburg Gate, and most of the it was said that most of the musicians in the Berlin Philharmonic now came there after the fall of the East Germany in '91, or it was 80, in the late '89, I think, because we were there in 2000, and East Germany was still suffering, but they had been reunited. Most of the musicians were young and came at that time. It's one of the most, I believe, it's one of the most amazing philharmonics in the world, and I've been watching. The thing that's wonderful about being online with their programs is you have close-up photos watching the musicians, and it's launched a whole idea in me for a study on the human body, how music pours through the human body, how a conductor, you can see the music going through his body, and yet there are only just a few definite motions, but it's the whole thing, and how a whole orchestra, a whole group of people can come together and do this thing that is just amazing. That's what it should be like, to have intimacy and fellowship, especially within the body of Christ. So I was watching their performance of Beethoven's Ode to Joy. It was in the summer, and I don't know what year, it doesn't really matter. But I was watching it a few weeks ago, since we've been in the quarantine, and I just realized how refreshing and wonderful it was for me to see 100,000 people close together. I sit here across from the church I go to, and there's absolutely no one on Easter. Everything is silent. It's like it's like a picture postcard, but with no humanity. And I think that we're all starved for closeness. And try the website out, and you'll see, especially there's just amazing variety of music. And one thing that's helped me is I was raised, my mother spoke German to me until I was about 7. And I have an ear for it, but I can't speak it. And just listening to the arias, and then they translate some of it, and I keep listening. Sometimes I won't look at the translation, and I will just listen to it, and it's brought back my ear for German. But the thing that I thought, the time, I was so overwhelmed by watching 100,000 people in front of the Brandenburg Gate. And all of the audience, I think there were 200,000 people there, filled the whole huge park, like in Paris. They were all singing along with Beethoven's Ode to Joy. It was just glorious. It was otherworldly. And I thought, isn't this interesting? The same race that produced Hitler and a lot of other things also produced Beethoven and Martin Luther and many other things. So good and bad were created through this race. And it's just like now with the suffering in World War II that they experienced, and the complete humiliation both in World War I and then the domination of Nazi Germany over the people. This generation now benefits from the sacrifices that we did here as a country and all over the world to put down evil and to destroy Hitler. The evil was destroyed, and now, after all this time, you can see the results of that redemptive act. And so tonight, through the music that was played by the Philharmonic this morning, was called Americans in Berlin. And it was all American music, Gershwin and some other new things that I've never heard. And it was so interesting to see very stiff traditional Germans respond to American music. They at one point said, we really respond to the freshness and creativity of American composers, and it symbolizes the freedom and spontaneity that America has as a nation. That very spontaneity and personal choice can also get us into trouble, as we can see right now, just as Hitler brought the Germans into trouble. It's a very dangerous period that we live in. But anyway, the music started out with Gershwin's American in Paris. And I just thought, how wonderful. Here's a new generation bringing hope to the world through music, through the most, divine. It really is divine music, and it was just like sent down from the gods. It was just perfection. So the first one was American in Paris, and you could just visualize the streets of Paris. I just came back from there, and in fact, in this article about the coronavirus, I realized that the outbreak in Italy was January 8th, and it was already in Europe in December, and we were in Strasbourg on December 7th and 8th. So it's very close to me and the dangers in my heart. So then the music turns to Gershwin West Side Story, which is a story of Romeo and Juliet, and it goes from a suave, international, cosmopolitan city to the inner city, Spanish Harlem in New York City. And as I was reading The Little Lame Prince today, he talked about going up in his magic traveling cloak and looking down over a city and seeing all the beautiful beauty of palatial buildings of the city. And I thought, that's how we see New York now. And in the magical coat, you could see squalor as well as beauty. And it was the first time the Little Lame Prince had ever seen it and didn't even know what it was. If you took a picture of New York City now, it would be really sad because it's pristine, but there are no people in it. And I noticed the other day there's an article talking about de-urbanization, that this is forcing people to think twice about being so urbanized and so dependent on things from the outside. Going on with West Side Story, the first one is Maria, and she sings I Feel Pretty. There's no one like Maria, and Maria, it goes to get her dress made, and she sings, "I feel pretty, I feel pretty." That's the way we see ourselves. We're pretty to the world. We're beautiful. And then it goes from there to which I thought was very prophetic, to someday there's a place for us, somewhere a place for us. Da, 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 da. And I just think that that's what we need to be asking ourselves as a nation and as individuals and as families. What is our place now, after the fact that our portrait that we've created all our lives now no longer exists? It's changed drastically, and we'll never be able to pretend again. We've come to a point of reality. I don't feel it's a judgment. It's not God judging us and punishing us because we're so sinful. That's rubbish. He brings change so that we can become creative again, so that we can take the fresh paints of how He created us in Adam and become that to the world individually, and I believe as a nation. I feel like we have a responsibility. So we have a responsibility to repair our economic infrastructure, like Germany did. We have a obligation to repair our medical care infrastructure, and we have an obligation to work hard and to create what God gives us opportunity to create, not something that we created in our own image and fantasized and said, "Aren't we beautiful and perfect?" and then spent years and years maintaining it. Like my friend said, "Well, when I get back to busyness, I can't spend all the time with my children." I said, "Take that off." I'm repeating myself, but take that off the board, because you volunteered for that. We volunteer for what we do. We are not victims. We are not even victims in this situation. We volunteer to consider ourselves victims in this coronavirus. And we're not victims if we can pray for those who are suffering. We can relieve someone's lack of food. The other morning I took a walk. I've seen this man once before. He's just wonderful. His name is Jeremy. And it looks to me like he sleeps under a shelter in a park. And he has a coffee maker. He has an automatic coffee maker and a radio. He has it all time. And he usually has his breakfast outside. He has a job, but he comes there and has breakfast. And I think maybe, I don't know if he's really homeless or not. I've offered to help him, but he said no. It's just really wonderful. And he was there again the other day, and I thought, there again is the face of Christ. There is where Christ meets us through other faces. And I've been thinking a lot about faces, hands, and feet, and been doing a study mainly because watching the Berlin Philharmonic, you just see the movements of their hands and feet and how the music penetrates their souls. And what is the connection between our souls, our face, our hands, our feet? In one of the devotionals during Easter, it talks about a post-resurrection appearance where Jesus appears to everyone in the upper room. I was in the upper room, they're hiding. And when they finally realize who he is, they all grab his feet. And it's really bugging me. I'm going to do a study on that passage and figure out why. You know, the three things that are really interesting. Jesus said to Mary Magdalene when he appeared to her in the garden, "Don't touch me yet, I've not gone to my Father." Then there's Thomas. He said, "Touch my side, my hands and my feet." And it's better to believe without being seen and touched. But he allowed that. And then the third one, all of the passages for the resurrection passage, a lot of them are from John. And I keep running across this passage. John was referred to as the beloved disciple. Well, that must have really, I don't know how other disciples felt at the time. That would really bug me if he was considered the beloved disciple. Say, "Oh, well, that's just for him." What is that? Does God choose favorites? I don't know. But I think there's something really important there between the way he treats Mary Magdalene and he treats John. They're really interesting. And John had a temper. He and his, they were called Sons of Thunder. And his mother was very conniving. So I'm going to try to do a study on that because I think it's important. But getting back to a place for us, somewhere a place for us, a time and place for us. I found this the other day while, it's a tiny rock, you can't see what it says on it. It's painted with 4 letters, a word, by Abigail when she was really young and was given to me as a present. And I call it my rock of hope, my star of hope. And it's written, hope is written on the front. It's just very faint, but it's still there. And I love holding it because it's like the mustard seed. It says if you have faith of the size of a mustard seed, you can move. And you say to this mountain, move, you can move mountains. So I believe that we need to grasp whatever little stone of hope that we have and ask God how we can serve others and care for others. In that same program, there was the most amazing, just amazing arrangement for violin and piano by Jascha Heifetz. If you get the website, you'll be able to see it. And it was Porgy and Bess. Summertime, when the living is easy. And so, that we're no longer in summertime. We're in the winter of existence. And then it goes on to, it ain't necessarily so. And that's what we have to hold on to now. We have to hold on to the fact that it ain't necessarily so that we will continue to be this way, that we will continue to be in defeat, that God has blessed us even in this misery, and He has not blessed us with misery. He is blessing us with His presence. He promises to be wherever we are. He promises to never leave us. My daughter, I'll show you this because it ties in as I close. My daughter, Abigail, I've been doing a lot of investigation into my early childhood. I was abandoned in a orphanage for 2 years. I've told you this before. And basically not touched or held. And although I've spent my whole life and I'm mature, nobody ever went back to that and had me look at it. And I've been doing that, and it's been really rough, especially being in isolation. So today, Abigail gave me this. It looks a little bit like a prayer apron, a Jewish prayer apron. It's a piece of French linen. We were just in Paris. She's hand-stitched it, and then she embroidered it on the front. And I'm going to hang this up in my room to remind me every day, just what I said, that God promises to be with us no matter what. And embroidered, she put, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you." So that's what I leave with you tonight. Before you were formed in the womb, before coronavirus, before our nation is in need like it is now, He knows us, and He wants to be close to us, and He wants us to love others as we love ourselves. So kids and parents and whoever you're with, the old song, if you can't love the one you want, love the one you're with. So it's never been more true. Folks, we have to love and empower, reach out to those in need. And I challenge you to start thinking about things that will be different when some of these things are lifted. What can you do to not to return to normalcy? We never will, and we shouldn't, because it's defective. Normalcy should be in His presence every day and to be thoroughly loved in ourselves, toward ourselves, and to others. Thank you all for letting me share this with you tonight. And I will see you tomorrow at 4 and at 7. We'll be doing another chapter of The Little Lame Prince. And then tomorrow night I will either start Prince Caspian or The Silver Chair. So have a wonderful evening. I'm so glad that I hope you all got rest. And I hope that when you wake up, even after you've rested, you won't be tired, because that's what I usually do, even if I do get a lot of sleep, because this isolation is exhausting. Thanks so much for joining me. Have a good night. God bless.